The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, 2 days before my wedding anniversary. So this is a cool weekend to talk about love and sex, very relevant. Yes, the 17th is my wedding anniversary. Yesterday was Valentine's Day. A lot of celebration going on. This is good. Phenomenal meal last night. The chocolate-themed dinner. It was amazing. The chef, this is the third time we've done this with him at his restaurant, and he seems every year to outdo himself. Every year the food gets even better when we think it can't get any better. So that was amazing. Hopefully you guys had a good Valentine's Day and having a good beginning to your weekend. All right. So today we're going to talk about love and sex. We're going to talk about it in the context of my series on being an egoist. So, into how are love and sex egoistic, and what does that mean? So we will discuss that, of course, you can, and I encourage to ask questions. Priority will be given to questions regarding generally this issue. Feel free to ask questions about egoism more broadly, but of course, feel free to ask questions about anything you want, But I will give priority to those questions that deal with the topic at hand and its various applications, particularly topics related to egoism. John has already come in with $100. Thank you, John. Really appreciate that. He says, here's to a great show. I love these types of episodes. Both seasoned objectivists and newcomers to the philosophy can benefit immensely from this content. Thanks, Yaron. Thank you, John. I really appreciate your support, and I really appreciate its support for these kind of shows, because the reality is these kind of shows get fewer viewers, a smaller viewership, but I'm hoping that these kind of shows are kind of building the more positive shows are building kind of a community of people who are taking the objectivist ideas that they might be introduced to through the politics, taking them to the next level, taking them more seriously, and engaging with them all the more. So yes. So thanks, John. I appreciate that. And you too can support the show by doing what John just did in a super chat. All right. Let's talk about love, and so obviously the reason for this is that Valentine's Day, and again in my case, wedding anniversary. But I did notice that I did this interview with John Stossel, and the issue of love came up, and so we talked about it, love being selfish. And he posted a video about that on Valentine's Day. So he used Valentine's Day, did some clips of my interview, and posted it on YouTube and Twitter and stuff. And it was fascinating to see the responses. That is, the number of people who were kind of shocked and upset and surprised and unhappy about the idea that love is selfish, and almost all of them came from the same background. Almost all of them cited the Bible or cited some passage from Christianity or something like that, where love is the essence of love. They are taught the essence of love, to a large extent, our culture teaches, is selfless. And the ideal of love, the pinnacle of love, the love that is the greatest of all loves, is unconditional love. The love that is not conditioned by anything. And these attitudes towards love, this general attitude towards love, is such a damaging and catastrophic one to people's psychology and people's ability to enjoy love, to express love, to embrace love. It is unbelievably destructive to our culture, because it's destructive to so many individuals out there, and it also explains, I think, some people's attitude towards sex, and we'll get to that. When love is selfless, all that can do, when people believe that love is selfless, and yet they experience love to the extent that they experience love as a selfish thing, there's no alternative. Love is a response to your values. It is an experience of joy from the existence of somebody. Then that is experienced as something selfish. They immediately, psychologically, must feel guilt around it. The same. If the same is true of the ultimate expression of romantic love, which is sex. They get pleasure from sex. Sex is exciting. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It produces immense joy, and yet love is supposed to be selfless. And what is this I'm experiencing? And soon enough, what you find is people separating the sex from the love. The sex is this materialistic, animalistic thing that they have this animalistic desire, need to do, but it has nothing to do with that beautiful, amazing, floating abstraction of selfless love. And of course, then they separate their love from their sex, and this is how you get the kind of sick promiscuity that exists in our culture, and I'm not condemning all. I mean, we'll get to what I consider sick promiscuity, a lot of things, but all right. So let's talk a little bit about love, what love is, and the extent to which and how it is that it is indeed selfish, and what should an egoist do? What does love mean to an egoist, and how should an egoist pursue love? And then, in that context, we should talk about sex and the fundamental meaning of sex, and why sex is important, why sex is so important, and why sex and love are so connected, right, and related to one another. So first, let's talk about what love is and why love is something we need. We need love. And here I think an analogy could be made to aesthetics, to art. And indeed, Ayn Rand makes this analogy in the Romantic Manifesto. She writes, there are two aspects of man's existence that are the special province and expression of his sense of life: love and art. Both love and art involve a response to a sense of life. In art, it's a sense of life response to an artist's sense of life reflected in his recreation of reality in a painting, a sculpture, a piece of music. In love, and particularly here in romantic love, but I think, I think to some extent this is true of friendship and other forms of relationship that we have with other human beings. There is a real response to the sense of life of another, and it is our sense of life that is responding to them. I mean, love is the response to values. Love is the emotional response to values, to something of value. To love ice cream is the emotional response to the fact that ice cream is a value to us. To love a particular movie is a response, an emotional response to the fact that a particular movie is particularly enjoyable to us. love for another human being is a response to the fact that this other human being is of great value to us. And here, I want to say something about, it being an emotional response, because there's a sense in which, I mean, it is an emotional response, but there's a sense in which love is similar to happiness. It's kind of an underlying emotional response. It's a constant. It's a emotional framework. It's a state of being. It's a state of consciousness. I mean, you can be angry at the person you love and yet still love them. That is, the emotion of the moment might be a negative emotion, and yet you still love them. Just like you can be sad because something has happened that is saddening, and yet still be fundamentally happy. So love is this kind of underlying basic emotional response to a particular, in terms of romantic love, to a particular human being. To a particular human being. And why is it that this other human being represents such a value to us? Because in some very deep, meaningful way, this other human being is giving us visibility, giving us access to a objectification, an existence in reality, very similar to art, of our own values, our own sense of life, our own character, our own personality, who we are as a human being. And we're seeing that, not that the person you love is an image of you. They're not. That would be scary. But they are reflecting back to you your most important values. The things that are part of your character, part of who you are and what you are. They are a sum that is reflective of what you think is important. And the sum is reflected in what they explicitly think they're important, what they implicitly, how they act, how they behave, even subtle aspects of their behavior, their personality. Ayn Rand puts it this way: it is with a person's sense of life that one falls in love, with that essential sum, that fundamental stand or way of facing existence, which is the essence of a personality. One falls in love with the embodiment of the values that formed a person's character, which are reflected in his widest goals or smallest gestures, which create the style of his soul. There's something to think about. The style of his soul. The individual style of a unique, unrepeatable, irreplaceable consciousness. It is one's own sense of life that acts as the selector and responds to what it recognizes as one's own basic values in the person of another. It is not a matter of professed convictions, though these are not irrelevant. It is a matter of much more profound, conscious and subconscious harmony. That's a beautiful way of saying it. So romantic love is a matter of, the response is a matter of conscious and subconscious harmony. It's a beautiful and profound way to put it. The other person gives you a image in reality. You know, in their actions, in their character, in their personality, in how they respond to things, and how they respond to you, of your own values. And it is a profound, we have a need to love. We have a need to see ourselves reflected in somebody else's eyes. Not in a second-handed way, Not that we need their thumbs up, their approval. What we need is to see ourselves there. What we need is a concretization, if you will, of our own soul. It's hard to hold your own being in your own mind as a constant. And yet to see it in somebody else is, in a sense, to see yourself in a new and profound way. And of course, this is incredibly pleasurable. It's incredible. It's incredibly pleasurable to oneself, and it results in this profound emotion of love, love that demands and requires the presence of this other person, and ultimately the manifestation of this love in the act of sex. Now, how is this selfish? How is this egoistic? Well, it's egoistic because fundamentally, love is a response to your own values. Love is a positive emotion that you feel. It is a sense of joy that is yours. And it is an expression of who you are, what you like. And it's the ultimate, it's the most egoistic thing you can experience. Because it's probably the most powerful emotion you can experience, the most powerful positive emotion you can experience. So it is what, brings that positivity, that joy, that satisfaction, and ultimately, adds to one's happiness living in this life. So, love is the experience of another human being being important and significant and crucial for one's own life, for one's own being, for one's own happiness. And that's, again, it's for one's own happiness, for one's own being, for one's own enjoyment of life, one's own. It is, again, ultimately, it is not ultimately, it is egoistic through and through. All right. So, I'm just looking at, I'm highly recommend reading Rand on Love. She writes in the Objective Aesthetic, love, friendship, respect, admiration are the emotional responses of one man to the virtues of another, the spiritual payment given in exchange for the personal, selfish pleasure which one man derives from the virtue of another man's character. So it's the pleasure one derives from somebody else, from the person you love. I mean, selfless love is, what does that even mean? How does that even connect? How can one have this deep sense of pleasure and claim it as selfless? If you are feeling pain from somebody else, that and you continued to interact with that person constantly, given the pain, that would be selfless. There would be nothing in it for you. But the fact that there is pleasure and that the essential emotion is a pleasurable emotion, love, makes it, by definition, if you will, egoistic and selfish. But it's more than that. If love, in a sense, is a reflection of one's values, then is a response to one's values, then one has to value. That is, a man, human being, who doesn't value cannot love. The more one values, the more one understands the things that one values, the more one is passionate about one's values, the more one is open to love. The man who goes through life, not that caring that much about anything, is unlikely to fall in love because there's nothing to fall in love with. And indeed, there's nobody to fall in love that is, this is a kind of, what is this man? What is he? Right? To fall in love, one must have a self. You are the one falling in love. So you must have a self, and a self requires values. It requires character. It requires something you care about. So in order to be in love, one must first have values. And in order to have values, one must first have a self. One must have self-knowledge. One must know who you must know who you are, what you like, what you don't like, why you like it. One must be passionate about living. In that sense, romantic love, the ultimate form of love, romantic love, requires that one have self-esteem, requires that one esteem oneself and therefore value one's values, care about one's values, want to achieve one's values, and be in active pursuit of one's values. And it's only a person of self-esteem, a valuer, a passionate valuer, who can then respond to a human being who now becomes a value to them. And respond, they become a value to them because they're reflecting those values, all the other values that are part of who you are and what makes you are being reflected back at them. But you have to have a self to have something reflected at you. You have to have a soul in order to respond to somebody else's soul. But souls are not something that just happen. Ayn Rand talks about this. Souls are something you create, something you build, something you make, something that you make by choosing values. To quote Rand, romantic love in the full sense of the term is an emotion possible only to the man or woman of unbreached self-esteem. It is his response to his own highest values in the person of another. But notice that if it's a response to his own highest values, he has to have highest values. It's an integrated response of mind and body, of love and sexual desire. Such a man or woman is incapable of experiencing sexual desire divorced from spiritual values. So, not only is love an expression of selfishness, romantic love cannot even be achieved without a real sense of self, without a self that knows itself, that knows its values, and therefore has self-esteem. So self-esteem is kind of a requirement for love. Self-esteem is a requirement for responding in such a way to other people. Here's another formulation from Ayn Rand, which is beautiful. This is from her essay on living death. Man is an end in himself. Romantic love, the profound, exalted, lifelong passion that unites his mind and body in the sexual act, I skipped ahead, is the living testimony to that principle, to the principle of being an end in yourself. You know, love and sex are expressions, in Rand's terminology, a testimony to the fact that you're an end in yourself. There's no other point than this. The pleasure, the emotion, the satisfaction, the positive emotional response that love and sex provide. That's what it's all about. That's what life is all about. That's it. That's the end. In that sense, what is the meaning of life? It's life. It's to live and to enjoy life, to pursue pleasure in life, to find love in life. That's the meaning of life. There's nothing beyond life. It's an end in itself. And the pleasure derived from love and sex is an end in itself. There's no purpose for that. And notice how selfish all of that is. It's all about my life, my pleasure, the meaning for me, my values, my emotions, my happiness. Now, of course, love requires another human being. And what love, romantic love, really means is that now this other human being has become part of my selfish interests. Their happiness is necessary for my happiness. Their achievement of their values is necessary for the achievement of my values. That is, they become an integral part of who and what I am. This is why one is willing to do almost anything for the person one's love. And it's not an act of sacrifice. It is consistent with the pursuit of one's own values, one's own happiness, one's own fulfillment. So the scope of what it means to be selfish now includes this other person as long as you love them. It doesn't have to. People fall out of love all the time. And then they stop being. But what love does is it binds this other person to you, where you now care about how they feel. You care about their own happiness. You care about their achievement of their own values. You care about whether they're sick or healthy. They now become, in a real sense, they now are your most important value. And in that sense, part of who you are and what you are. And therefore part of yourself. So there's no sacrifice, there's no selflessness in caring about somebody you love. There is selflessness in really deeply caring about somebody you don't know, you've never met, you've never heard of, lives far away. That's pretty selfless. All right. So, and love, of course, is something that, if it's mutual, hopefully it is, and romantic love requires mutual love, because romantic love needs to be expressed through sex, and that requires, consent, and it's not going to be, and it needs to be, mutual in order to be able to build the life around it, and ultimately marriage is about, building a life around romantic love, building a life around a long-term relationship with this other person and a commitment to this other person. Again, doesn't mean it will last forever, but is the intentionality of building a long-term relationships on the basis of the romantic love is what's involved. And that requires, of course, a lot of work, like every value. Values need constant action. They need constant attention. They need constant work in order to maintain them. If a value is that which one acts to gain or keep, values require action. Who am I supposed to block? I'm not looking at the chat, so I don't know what's going on. I'm trying really hard not to look at the chat these days so as not to get distracted. And there I did it, and I got distracted. So love requires nurturing, it requires attention, it requires work, it requires constant cultivation. And it has to be mutual. So it has to be mutual actions that are reciprocal in order to constantly work and build a loving relationship. You don't fall in love, have sex, and then that's it. And then it's just smooth riding from then on, and nothing has to happen. Nothing needs to be done. It's just automatic. No, it needs work. It needs work on oneself, and it would work to stay engaged, in touch, in contact, visible, and in a nurturing relationship with the person that you're in love with. So love requires effort. Just like, again, if you value your career, it requires constant work on the career. It requires constant new achievements. The same with loving another person. It can never become something passive. As soon as it becomes something passive, you're falling out of love. Love falls apart. Okay, let's see. What else do we want to say about love? Let's talk a little bit about sex, and then hopefully you guys have got questions, because this is much more interesting as responses to questions. But again, in particular questions, if you have questions about this particular topic, it would surprise me if you don't have a lot of questions about this particular topic. I don't think it's a simple topic. I don't think it's straightforward. It seems to me that there's a lot of confusion out there about these kind of issues. So feel free to jump in with questions, comments, disagreements in the super chat. Doing it in the chat is useless in terms of getting my attention, because I'm not seeing the chat. As human beings, we're built in such a way that if we have healthy self-esteem, if we have a self, if we understand who we are, what our values are, what those values reflect, and then we discover it in another person, that emotional response of love is attached to a response of sexual desire. We want to experience our love in the form of the immense pleasure that sex can provide. If part of the need for love comes from a need for visibility, from psychological visibility into our character and into who we are, into our soul, if you will, sex is an opportunity for the deepest form of visibility. In sex, we are truly naked. We are exposed. what we like and what we don't like, what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy, how we act in sex, is a naked expression of who we are and what we are. There's no way to hide when one is having sex. And it's incredibly intimate, which means it's incredibly revealing of who one is. And to have that level of intimacy, have that level of visibility, have that level of physical and spiritual contact, connection, you know, that is particularly special when one is doing it with somebody that one loves. It makes sex so much more powerful, so much more enjoyable, so much more of an experience, not just a physical act. So it is the culmination, it is the expression of one's love, it is the expression of romantic love. And it's the expression of valuing. And if you think about sex as being naked, not just in one's, again, not wearing clothes, but naked spiritually as well, naked in terms of your revealing yourself deeply, in terms of the most pleasurable thing you could be doing, right? Who do you want to share that with? Just anybody? Any stranger? Anybody off the street? Rand writes, man's sexual choice is the result of the sum of his fundamental convictions. Because it's who he wants to be with. This is me. Who he wants to experience this immense pleasure with. Tell me what a man finds sexually attractive, and I will tell you his entire philosophy of life. Show me the woman he sleeps with, and I will tell you his evaluation of himself. No matter what corruption he's taught about the virtue of selfishness, sex is the most profoundly selfish of all acts. An act which he cannot perform for any motive but his own enjoyment. Just try to think of performing it in a spirit of selfless charity. An act, sex, which is not possible in self-abasement, only in self-exaltation, only in the confidence of being desired and being worthy of desire. It is an act that forces him to stand naked in spirit as well as in body, and to accept his real ego as a standard of value. He will always be attracted to the woman who reflects his deepest vision of himself. The woman whose surrender permits him to experience, or to fake, a sense of self-esteem. So, you experience your own you experience your own sense of self-esteem by the nature of the person you are having sex with. By the interaction you're having. Otherwise, you can't make sex about just masturbation. Sex is not just masturbation. Sex involves another human being. Another human being trying to achieve their own pleasure. Sex involves another spirit, another character, another set of values, another personality. You're interacting with that personality and with that other human being in an incredibly intimate way, in a way that is very revealing of you. Who do you want to have this incredible sense of enjoyment, of pleasure, of satisfaction with? Just anybody? I mean, this to me is one of the things that was so horrific about a line of guys wanting to have sex with a woman all standing in a row to do it. I can't think of anything more self-debasing. It's, masturbation is great. If all you want is the physical pleasure, then just masturbate. No, you're wanting something else. You're wanting to be in a line with other guys for a woman who's just opening her legs up to anybody. What does that say about you and who you are and what you represent and what self-esteem you don't have? That pleasure of that orgasm is shared with such a creature. I mean, Rand says, to a rational man, sex is an expression of self-esteem, a celebration of himself and of existence. And I think she's absolutely right. Sex is a celebration. Who do you want to celebrate with? Sex is a celebration of you and of the world and of reality. But to gain that meaning, it has to be with somebody who shares your values, somebody who in them you see a reflection of the world, your values, your kind of character, your kind of self-esteem. It's an expression of your, being glad and being happy about being alive. And again, think about, who do I want to share those things? Now, at some level, the idea of having a party, who do you want to party with? With people you like. And who do you like? People who share your values. So even at a level of, not of sex, but just of enjoyment, of celebration, of doing fun stuff, who do you want to have fun with? People you like, people who share your values. Well, who do you want to do the greatest of all celebrations? The thing that is the most fun. The things that results in the greatest pleasure possible. Well, with a person that reflects your values more than any other. All right, so sex should be, and it's best when it is, the expression of romantic love. It's the ultimate expression of romantic love. Indeed, romantic love cannot survive, I don't think, without sex, without that reaffirmation of that pleasure. Now, certainly there's circumstances where you can still be in love and romantic and sex is impossible for a variety of reasons, but not ideal. Not ideal. The ideal is that it is what is part of the relationship. It's a crucial part that sustains that relationship. That doesn't mean one cannot have sex with people who are of lesser value. One can enjoy that and get something out of it. It does mean that one should not have sex with people one despises, on people that does not value, or just random people. It does not mean one should only have sex with the ultimate love of one's life. Sex is something to be enjoyed, experiment with people or the person you value. But its ultimate expression, both of sex, is doing it with somebody you're romantically in love with. All right. Open to questions about any of this: sex, love, And again, this should be a topic. I know it's personal and sometimes difficult to talk about, but it should be a topic of lots of questions because I think a lot of people out there in the world are confused by it. Let's see, Michael. Okay, that. Yeah, Jennifer says, I understand why Rand said you want to show your best self to your loved one. Sometimes you're upset about something, though, and you should not repress it. So you should talk about it, right? Support each other. Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, once you have a marriage, once you're living with somebody, once you have decided to turn romantic love into a life with this other person, then that means you're now sharing a life. And that means sharing everything that's involved in that life. And the frustrations, the failures, the anger, the sadness, whatever's involved. And the other person, if they love you, care about those things. They care about the impact all those things have on you. Again, you are now, and what happens to you and what's going on with you is of value to them. It matters to them. So, once your love relationship is now, in a sense, expressed in a long-term relationship, marriage, or some other form of long-term relationship, then the fact that this other person views you as such a value means that they are interested and should be interested in what is going on with you, and therefore should be interested in supporting and nurturing and helping and assisting and everything to make it possible. Now, again, that's as long as the love is still there. That as long as you are values to each other. It doesn't always last, and one has to think about that. So if all one is doing is, it has to be reciprocal. At the end of the day, it has to be based on positive things. If one gets into this rut where it's all negative, and one party is supporting the other party constantly all the time, then the love is not going to survive. The love requires reciprocity. It requires a win-win relationship. It requires positives. This is why I think sex is so important in marriage and in a relationship, because it's a reminder of those of that positivity. It's a return to pleasure, right? It's a expression of the pleasure that is at the root of the relationship. So I think love can indeed die without sex, or a relationship could die without it, because that pleasure that is at the core of the loving relationship. What you're doing for each other, to each other, is fundamentally pro each other's life, and the greatest expression of that is in sex. Andrew, it strikes me that some don't pursue love because they're scared of it not being returned. But love is an individual response. Its validity does not depend on reciprocity. Unrequested love can be painful, but at least it's love. Yes, but people are afraid of the pain. People are afraid of the pain. The pain is painful. But the love is enjoyable. But it's absolutely true that unreciprocated love is painful, and it's hard. But it would be like, I'm not going to pursue a career because I might fail. I'm not going to start the business I've always dreamed of starting because I might not raise the capital. I'm not going to try and do this thing I love because I might not be good at it. I mean, yes, not achieving one's value, not getting love reciprocated is painful. But if you don't take risks in life, we've talked about this on other shows in other contexts, if you don't take risks in life, you're not going to live. You're not going to thrive. You're not going to be successful. You don't, there's no certainty about success in any realm of life. There's no certainty about how much money you're going to make. There's no certainty about the skills you can acquire. There's no certainty about your success. All you can do is you know that these are the things that are necessary in order to succeed. I need to do these things. But things can happen that deny you that success. And that's true in love as well. What you can do is make yourself lovable. And the way to make yourself lovable is to be a valuer, to be rational, to have self-esteem, to build a character that is worthy of love. What you can control is you. What you can control is your character. What you can control are your actions. You can control is ultimately whether you pursue your values or not. So don't let the possibility of failure stop you from pursuing the values that are important in your life. And love is a huge value, and it is a need. It is necessary. And I think to be truly happy, you need to experience romantic love. You need to pursue it. And it might not last, but at least you experienced it. And you know that line from not Shakespeare, who is it? From the great poet whose name slips my mind right now. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Absolutely. But the fear of not getting reciprocity is really a fear that one is not worthy of love. Tennyson, thank you, Mary Ellen. It's Tennyson. The fear of not getting reciprocity is a fear that you're not good enough. And that is an expression of a lack of self-esteem. And it requires working on your self-esteem, working on making yourself valuable, making yourself worthy of love. It might not be of any of that particular person that right now you're pursuing, but it might be of somebody else at somebody else at some point. Never stop seeking love and romantic love in particular. Because you should never stop valuing. If love is a response to values, romantic love is the response to highest of values, you always want to be pursuing values, and you, ultimately you will feel love because you are pursuing values. Stop being afraid generally. I think fear is a dominant emotion in our life, fear and guilt, and all driven by selflessness, all driven by an upbringing that has told us we should be selfless, that has told us we are worthless, that has told us to submit and not seek out our highest values. Don't give in. Don't give in to the haters. Don't give in to an anti-love culture. Pursue love no matter what. Oscar says, your perspective on love and sex is fascinating. Would you say it comes from Ayn Rand's philosophy, personal experience, or deep dive into love and relationship literature? I'd say it comes from Ayn Rand's philosophy and my personal experience. I cannot say I've had any kind of deep dive into love and relationship literature. I know almost nothing about love and relationship literature. It comes from Rand's philosophy, and it comes from my own experience. I'd be married on Monday. It'll be 42 years, a long time. I've also, so I can say that. I've also can say that I've observed other people, right? So I've lived a long time. I've known a lot of people. I've experienced a lot, seen a lot. And yeah, it comes from my experience and her philosophy. And I find that on these issues, her philosophy has been consistent with my experiences in life. It's what makes me so committed to her philosophy, because it turns out it's true in the sense that it works. It's consistently plays out there. And you can see, you can learn from other people's relationships as well, to some extent, because you can't really know the intimate details of what other people's relationships are like, but you can see somewhat from that. So, yes. Troy, thank you. Troy just came in with $500. It says, great show. Thank you, Troy. Thank you for the support. Happy to do these shows. I'm glad you are enjoying it, and the rest of you are enjoying it. Jennifer says, have you ever heard of a man who put a high value on how women look, but then when a woman puts effort into her looks, they call her vain and high maintenance? So this is men who put a high value on how women look. Yes, I mean, this is just another expression of, I think, the confusion and the irrationality and the lack of a proper understanding of one's values that our world is filled with. So and it's this combination of selflessness and some selfishness and guilt and not a real understanding of selfishness, and again and again and again. So, for example, this idea that she's vain and high maintenance is she's selfish. And I don't want a selfish woman. I don't want a woman who thinks of herself, who invests in herself. I just want her to be pretty. I want her to be pretty for me. I want her to be selflessly pretty for me. And it's a confusing, irrational position to value her looks, but then not to value the effort she puts into her looks. But it's exactly this kind of values confusion that people have. And it really stems from their inability to properly integrate what it means to be egoistic, and that egoism is a good thing, that they are constantly fighting with certain, call them selfish desires, selfish values, versus their explicit or implicit other ideas that say selfishness is bad, and there's a constant battle between these two things. And it distorts and perverts relationships all the time. It's one of the most destructive things out there. It's destructive to your own soul, and it's destructive to your ability to interact with other people, to have relationships with other people. And this is why I think it's so important for people to embrace self-interest, embrace egoism, figure out how it applies in every aspect of their lives, figure out, importantly, what their moral values are that are consistent with egoism, with their pursuit of their own life, their own happiness, and then really, really work on identifying the values that are consistent with their life, that are consistent with their happiness, that are consistent with their passions. Make sure, of course, those values are consistent with living and progress and success and life, because you could be filled with desires and values that are anti-life because of the way we were brought up. And then work on those values, cultivate those values, nurture those values. This is what it means to make yourself worthy, and then get rid of the contradictions. See, so many people out there accept that they should be self-interested up to a point, but not too much, and they never have cleansed out the altruism and the selflessness, the ideas of altruism and selflessness that are in the book, they're in their mind. And but this is what actually is needed. It's to take your own egoism, your own life, your own values, your own self much more seriously, and to work at it. And that's what love requires, instead of superficial things like, I put a high value on how a woman looks, but not on who she is and what she is, and not on how she, you know, you get these clashes. Okay, I'm not sure I understand this. Oh, this is Maud Lebowski. This is, do you like sex, Mr. Lebowski? I like it too. It can be a natural, zesty enterprise. However, there are certain individuals who engage in it compulsively and without joy. Yes, it's a good quote. Although, you know, again, what's missing here is it's a natural, zesty enterprise with people one likes, at the very least, with someone one values. It's not natural or zesty when it's done with somebody who's a complete stranger, complete unknown. So this is Mr. Lebowski. Oh, who is she saying? Oh, she's Mrs. Lebowski. Is she Mrs. Lebowski? I'm not sure what movie this is from. I'm not familiar with that quote. Richard said, what does emotional connection mean to you in the context of love? Well, an emotional connection means, it can mean a few things. It means responding to things in a similar way. It means responding to things in a similar way. It means caring and responding to the other person's emotions. So having an emotional reaction to their emotions. So if the person you love is in distress, emotionally distressed, you feel it. You're connected. It's part of you. So it's important to you. So you feel it too. You react emotionally to their emotions. So emotion connection is when another person is, because they're so important to you, their life is integrated into yours because they're such a value to you. And therefore you respond emotionally to them. It's the best I have, Richard. Andrew, I think the implied view of conservatives on sex is that the process is procreation. The purpose is procreation. Sex for joy is looked down on. It's a duty, like all else. What does the sex for procreation view do to one's attitude towards sex? So I'll just add to the conservative view. I think the best expression of the conservative view is Reardon's approach to sex in Atlas Shrugged. If you remember the little speech he gives after he has sex for the first time with Dagny. And so he recognizes it's pleasurable. He recognizes it provides immense pleasure, and it's desirable. It's something he desires. But it's both the joy and the desire is associated with an animalistic urge. It's because joy, pleasure are these egoistic things, selfish things. They're not worthy. They're not spiritual. They're not moral. They're not elevated. They're associated with us being animals. And yeah, one has to have sex to procreate. And you know, we have urges, so we have to have sex. In religion, often what you'll get is priests and rabbis and so on telling the couple, no, you should have sex. You have urges, you need a fulfill the urges, right? You can't go without fulfilling the urges. That'll create tension, and that'll create stress, and it'll manifest itself badly. Right? Instead of, you should be celebrating life, go do it. This saying, no, you've got this animalistic urge. All animals have sex, all of them, see? And you just do it. You just remember, it's not that important, but you got to do it. You got to, every Friday night or wherever. Right? So the conservative view of sex is very is the purpose of procreation. It happens to be pleasurable, but pleasure's not that important. But since we're an animal, since we're fallen, the fall of man, since we're fallen, and we're therefore selfish and therefore desirous of pleasure, we seek it out. But that's the animal in us. That's not who we are as an elevated being. Which is just a horrible attitude. Horrible, horrible, horrible attitude. Now, you ask, what does the sex for procreation view do to one's attitude towards sex? Exactly that. Sex is also for procreation. But I think a proper view of man as a conceptual being, not as an animal, is that, evolution created, sex is for procreation evolutionarily wise. But we now have free will. We are now a conceptual being. We are not an animal. We do not have to procreate. Now we can separate out the procreation from the pleasure, and we can have sex for purely pleasurable reasons. This is why one of the greatest inventions in all of human history, the conservatives are going to flip out now, one of the greatest inventions in all of human history is easy, accessible birth control. Because for women in particular, you could never completely separate procreation from sex, because there was always a risk. And it's a real risk for a woman to have a child out of birth in our culture, in almost every culture in human history, was very, very detrimental to her future. Men could walk away, women cannot. So whether it's the pill or whether it's other forms of contraception that are easily accessible, easily available, and cheap, and can be bought over the counter, this is one of the great innovations in human history. I mean, it's the sexual revolution, we want to call it, is a monumental event in human history, which conservatives hate, despise. They loathe it. Because as long as sex was associated with procreation, they could limit it to marriage. They could say, oh, the risk of getting pregnant is too big. You cannot have sex before marriage. You shouldn't. It's dangerous. It's really, really bad. But now that you can separate it, people can actually have sex for pleasure without the procreation, and that offends them. People are out there being egoistic by having sex for pleasure. That's horrible. So it's incredibly destructive, and this is why you will see people like Walsh and Knowles on Daily Wire be so anti birth control and so anti the sexual revolution. Not only that, but the sexual revolution also recognized that sex was pleasurable for women as well. That sex was not just a means for men to experience pleasure, but a means by which women could experience pleasure. And suddenly, the sexual revolution brought forward this idea that women, could experience pleasure, should experience pleasure, had their own set of desires when it came to sex, their own things that they liked and didn't like with sex, the things that they wanted from sex that weren't always the same exactly as men. and that compatibility around sex was important because, you know, one of the things that romantic love, because you love the other person, you want them to experience the pleasure that you're experiencing out of sex. To experience sex where only you experience pleasure. Again, back to that 100 guys lined up in front of, look, to have sex with a woman. To experience sex where only you're having pleasure is just, I mean, I find it weird and detached. So there's a real mutuality that comes in sex. It's your pleasure, her pleasure, the pleasure you get from her getting pleasure, the pleasure she gets from you achieving pleasure, this reciprocality of this win-win. I mean, sex, good sex, is the biggest win-win there is. And it's that reciprocality which makes it so powerful, makes it so intimate, and again, links sex to love. Somebody you love, you want that person to enjoy. You want that person to experience what you're experiencing. So it is fantastic that we now have the opportunity to put procreation and fertility and all that aside and enjoy sex and embrace the pleasure that is associated with sex. Oh God, I talked about sex for pleasure, and like a bunch of people have left the show. All the conservatives abandoned me. Frank says, we the living is a wonderful statement of love, conquering a nasty culture and the parasitic claims of others. Knowing when to love, not too young or too old, is an awareness confused by our current culture. Any thoughts? Great show. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you on We the Living. But of course, love doesn't conquer all, because here's an example where at the end, love is not reciprocated. And the consequence of that is catastrophe. So, We the Living is a testament to how much Kira, right, the heroine of We the Living, fights for love, fights for her lover, what she is willing to do for her lover, for the person she loves. I mean, it's also a really interesting book in the sense that written in the 1930s, and it's very sexually, in some ways, liberated, right? I mean, Kira has sex in order to save her lover. She has sex with another man, whom she likes. So she probably enjoys that sex, although it's not the same as sex with the man she loves. So it's an interesting triangular relationship, which occurs in almost all of Ayn Rand's books, right? Dominique in The Fountainhead has sex with a bunch of men, as she loves Oni Rourke. And Dagny, of course, has sex with 3 of the heroes of Atlas Shrugged. Although, of course, the love of her life is the final one who she probably stays with. But yes, We the Living is about fighting for your values. It's about fighting for love. It's about fighting. You could view it as a political book, but primarily a personal book. And how she fights for the man she loves and everything she's willing to do selfishly for the man she loves. The degree to which she's willing to suffer for the man she loves because he is such an important value to her. And then you say, knowing when to love, not too young or too old, is an awareness confused by current culture. Well, I mean, it's always been confused, right? I mean, love, there's a whole history of love, which is interesting, right? Fascinating. because in the past, you were expected to marry very young. And I think we live in a much more mature culture today in that respect. People don't marry young anymore. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. People want to experience love, experience sex, figure out what works and what doesn't. And I think ultimately you'll see less divorce because people are getting married older. Now, it doesn't mean they're not falling in love when they're 16. That's fine to fall in love with your 16. Romeo and Juliet. But it means that you don't want to make a long-term commitment until you know more about yourself, more about love, more about sex, more about relationships. Now, I lucked out because and some of it is luck. I fell in love very young. And it worked out amazingly, partially because we worked on working it out, right? So because we got married young, fell in love young, married young, I think we grew up together in many regards. We matured together. But that requires to do that, to be able to mature together, to be able to grow up together, one has to work at it. It doesn't just happen. One has to have patience. One has to really value. And one has to really care, one really love, and then do the works necessary to stay together in spite of the tendency of people as they grow older to drift apart. So again, relationships, marriage, long-term loving relationship requires work, requires real work. So I think we're healthier today in the sense that people wait longer to get married. You shouldn't wait to love, and I don't think you should wait much to have sex, but you should wait before you marry because I think it's harder if you get married young to sustain the relationship. It's doable. I'm testament to that, but it's harder. All right. So, yes, thank you, Frank. Really appreciate it. $50. Appreciate the support. All right. I'm going to scan. I know Michael has a $20 question I need to get to, but I'm going to scan looking for another Michael question. One's related to the topic. Ultra-processed food, not related to the topic. All right. Apollo Zeus. Why is it I can be more sexually attracted to someone who I don't love more than a person I actually love, but am still sexually attracted to, but less so? I don't know. I mean, it's a psychological question. It has to do with your psychology. It has to do ultimately with your values and what you value and what you don't, what is important to you and what is not. It's not ideal, but it's something you have to introspect and you have to think about or talk to a therapist about. But I don't find that. For some reason, the aesthetic element is more important to you vis-a-vis sex than is the love element, the connection element, the relationship element. And I think that's upside down. But what causes it, I don't know. There's some lack of integration there somewhere, but I don't know where. Now, I can be attracted sexually to other women, but it doesn't match, my attraction to my wife, right? You can be attracted for all kinds of reasons to other women, aesthetic, and other reasons. Somebody could be really cool, really nice, really, I don't know, whatever. But A, it doesn't mean you have to act on it, and B, it doesn't match. It shouldn't match in intensity the sexual attraction you have to somebody you love, and it doesn't. Kabuto. Isn't it rather the expression of the selfish gene trying to reproduce itself by chemical reactions to the brain? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's how human beings work. I don't think selfish genes are playing a role here. There's a sense in which the selfish gene evolved a new mechanism, and that mechanism is human consciousness. It instead of I mean, this is all metaphorical, right? But instead of having to encode every possibility into our DNA in terms of our behavior and what we did and how we did it all the time, evolution figured out something miraculous, something amazing to circumvent all of that, and that is, it gave us a mechanism by which we can rewrite the script. We can determine our own fate. We can decide what to do and what not to do. You are not a product of your genes. You're a product of your choices. You're a product of your decisions. You're a product of your values, of the value choices you make. So your genes play a factor. They're there, but they're not driving you to have sex. Now, it might be true that the general existence of a sexual desire comes from the evolution of procreation. But again, because we have free will and we can reason, we can override that. And we do override it to the point where we can have, to the point where we can say, we can shape our own sexual desire. And our sexual desire shapes us. If it was just procreation, we'd be happy to have sex with anybody. Or we'd all be attracted to the same women if it was some hierarchy of whatever. But we're not. So, no, it's not an expression of our genes at all. Our genes play a role, but that's not a fundamental role. Andrew says, it struck me that when Rand said love is an unlimited response, it's like productivity in a sense. There's no end to it. And it's not zero-sum. It's not zero-sum. It's not taking anything. It's not some limited resource. It's an expression of the fact that there's no limit to it. You love somebody, you value them, and it's constant. It's constant. And it persists throughout life, or it can persist throughout life. And there's no, and it's reciprocal and win-win, and in that sense, very much not zero-sum. It's like the fact that human needs are infinite. Human needs are unlimited. There's no limit to human needs. There's no limit to human love. If it's good to aspire, how does one evaluate punching above one's own weight? Where do you draw the line or ceiling? Yeah, I don't know what exactly that means. I don't know what one's own weight means here. What does it mean in the context of love or relationships? You know, there's a whole view based on genetics that, women are attracted to men who can provide better genes so their children will be stronger and whatever, And if you're good looking, you can only get a good looking wife. And if you're ugly, you should accept an ugly wife. First of all, I look around the world and I don't see any of that manifesting itself. Purely, it manifests itself a lot, but I think that has to do with the culture we live in. But what does it mean? You need to make you the best human being you can be. And then find a woman who's attracted to that. You need to make yourself have the best character possible. You need to shoot for being the best you can be. For maximizing your abilities. Maximizing your pride. Your self-esteem. And then go for the women you fall in love with, and hopefully you find somebody who reciprocates. But the focus shouldn't be, I'm X, I need to find somebody who's X minus 1 so they'll appreciate an X. No, you're striving constantly to be X plus, 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 to add, to improve, to get better, to be more. You should never settle for who you are. Never settle for who you are. And strive. And, I think people who go for superficial aspects, superficial elements, superficial reasons for loving somebody else, they'll end up being superficial. Women who will only date men that are taller than them are not going to have deep, meaningful relationships because they're limiting the scope of who they can be, and they're emphasizing things that are ultimately irrelevant to their own happiness in the long run. So, I mean, most women are shorter than most men. On average, women are shorter than men, so it's going to work out. Most women are going to be out with men who are taller. But that is not the reason. So I don't know what punching above one's weight is, because I don't know what one weight did. Make way more. Work on it. All right, let's see. Okay, Andrew, how do you think art would differ vis-a-vis sex in an unreplaced culture? Art would differ. I think there would be a lot more expressions of intimacy in art. Given the importance of intimacy, given the importance of sex, it is rarely shown, expressed in art. Sensuality is rarely expressed and shown. I mean, movies show it, but then they tend to show it just as a physical manifestation of it. And I know a lot of people don't like watching sex in a movie. Why not? It's a fantastic human thing that we do. Why wouldn't we want to experience it artistically, just like to experience other things artistically? Now, again, that is not about porn. That is about art, doing it artistically, stylized, emphasizing what is important, right? If you do that, it can be an amazing experience, aesthetic experience. And I think that in a world that was unrepressed, you would see more of that, not less of that. And if you look at Greek art, there was a lot more expression of sex in Greek paintings, for example, in pottery and things like that. Now, some of it, maybe they had a materialistic view of sex, but you can see what's possible once you get Christianity out of the ballgame, or you look at the Kama Sutra or the statues in India that involve sex, that are quite educational, because you can really learn some new poses, some new possibilities in terms of what is possible with sex from some of those statues and certainly from the Kama Sutra book, although some of them require agility that I certainly have never been able to develop. But, I mean, this is the thing about sex. Sex is something to be explored. It's something to be, experimented with. There's a lot of options and possibilities. I think the one good thing about porn is, in a repressed culture, it's the one place where you can go and say, you can do that? That fits, that works, that whatever, right? That you might not have thought of, and you might not have considered, or that is certainly not going to be taught or not going to be in the culture other than in porn. So, don't hurt yourself. Frank is right. Don't hurt yourself. But yeah, try it all out, because you might discover things that, I didn't know I could feel that. I didn't know, what that, and again, different sexual poses also have, they both, I think, physically and in a sense spiritually and in a sense, have different They impact you in different ways. So one of the things you shouldn't make sex is boring. Explore it. Figure new things out. You should spend your first, you should spend a big chunk of your youth figuring out what you like and what you don't like in sex. So that, because later the agility is gone. Lucinda says, the possibility of failure is a lot more preferable to stagnation, both in the pursuit of love and the pursuit of values in general. Absolutely. Absolutely. In every value, that is true. It's better to have tried and lost than never to have tried at all. In other words, it's better to value. Value, implicit in the term value, is the action. Act. There's no guarantee. Valuing doesn't guarantee anything. Shazbot. Thank you, Shazbot. $50. Okay. Protestant husband. Look at those Catholics filling the world with people they can't feed. Every time they have sex, they have to have a baby. Protestant wife. But it's the same with us. We have 2 children, and we've had sex twice. That's in the meaning of life. Monty Python. You can't beat Monty Python. So that's good. Thank you for the laugh, Shazbot, and for the support. Really, really appreciate it. Florida Nick says, I just found $10 and I give it to you. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. All right. Andrew says, capitalism is the system of sex. Yes. But it's a system of love more than anything else. Free exchange, productivity, self-esteem, the dreary, coercive atmosphere of socialism deadens animal spirits. Rand's connection of economics to sex is an achievement. Yes. Sex, great sex comes from self-esteem. And self-esteem is a product of productivity and exchange and building and creating, and that is manifest in capitalism. By the way, there was a New York Times article about a few years ago, about how sex was better under communism. It's just so not true, not possibly true. Marilyn says, a Mississippi lawmaker recently introduced an idiotic bill called Contraception Begins at Erection. So don't get an erection. That's the ultimate contraception, I guess. So we should I think we should make erections illegal, unless you're married and intend to have a baby. God, people are crazy. Mary Eileen, I love the story of Eloise and Abelard. Even though it has a tragic ending. Passionate, forbidden love in the 12th century between 2 brilliant scholars. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the great love stories ever, and it continues after, so I don't want to give it away because, you guys should read up on the Eloise and Abelard love story. It is truly phenomenal. But they continue to communicate. She's at the nunnery, and he becomes a very well-known philosopher and theologian. And they continue to communicate their entire lives with these amazing letters, just amazing letters reflecting what real love means, even when it cannot be now expressed through sex. And, their love just comes through these letters in a way that's, you rarely see in modern times. But yes, it's a passionate, it's forbidden love. Although, anyway, I don't want to give it away. But ultimately, when they die, they're buried together, even though they've been separate all this time. And their bones actually were moved to Paris at some point, because that's where the love affair was, in the 19th century, I think. Once it was recognized as a great love affair. Marilyn says, you alluded once to the difference between pornography and eroticism. Would you elaborate? Oh, God. What did the Supreme Court say? When you see it, you know it. I don't know that I have a technical definition. I think pornography does a few things. One, it is purely physical. It emphasizes purely the mechanics and the physical nature of sex. It doesn't try to evoke any kind of connection of character, love, spiritual between those having sex. And it's the way it's filmed, the angles, the close-ups, all oriented towards purely mechanistic physical stimulation. And there's nothing beyond that. And I think that people grow up with, I understand why people who grow up with porn and think that is what sex is, and don't have an alternative, which I think art could provide, view sex as purely materialistic and have never been exposed to anything else. That's all they've known. And therefore they're susceptible to the kind of insanity of sex that exists today, like the girl who had sex with 100 guys. I think you can create a stylized, and that's what eroticism I think would be, or an aesthetic or artistic depiction of sex. It would be a stylized. It wouldn't shy away from the mechanics. It wouldn't shy away from what is actually happening, from the act itself. But just like in every other action that human beings engage in, it would stylize it, it would beautify it, and it would emphasize or focus on the spiritual value orientation, emotional aspect of the sex. Right? And so that I think that is the difference. So you find attempts at eroticism. Some are better, some are worse. I don't know anybody who's really mastered it, who's done a really good job. But yes, it's where the emphasis is, without shying away from sex, the emphasis is on the emotion. Right? I think that would be the difference versus porn, again, which is purely mechanistic, and again, every aspect of the way it's filmed. There's nothing stylized about it. I mean, once in a while, a porn director will try to do something more aesthetic, more artistic, but they don't know what they're doing because they're not artists. All right, I think that is all the questions on topic. So let's wrap it up with some questions off topic, unless there's some. Caligula, Chandler mentions Caligula, the movie, which was done by Penthouse Magazine, was an attempt to create an artistic expression with sex in it. But the problem with the movie was not the sex. The problem with the movie of Caligula is there's no point to it. So the sex was used to show how depraved and just ugly a human being Caligula was. So there was no emotion, there was no romance, there was no love in the sex there, because there was no love in Caligula's sex life. So it's not a good example of using art to depict the positives of sex. It used art to depict sex as animalistic. Now, it had a very, very beautifully filmed orgy scene, if I remember right, as the movie Caligula. Okay, but again, it's not what we're talking about. It's still I don't know what it qualifies at. It's not exactly. It doesn't quite rise to being art. It was like a cheap thrills video. Okay, Michael. In a zero-sum world, people feel the need to be passive-aggressive or put a psychological pressure on you in some way to get what they want. Being honest and genuine doesn't even cross their minds. I think that's right. I think the more people have a zero-sum mentality, the more they want to manipulate you, the more they want to, extract stuff from you, the more they want to, put pressure on you, because the only way they can win is by you losing. And in order for you to lose, they need to manipulate you. They need to guilt you into it. They need to pressure you into it, because you're not going to do it voluntarily. If you believe that the world is a win-win place, that relationships are win-win, then being genuine and honest and trading and that's all possible. And then if you encounter people who don't want to trade with you, you walk away and you go somewhere else. But absolutely, all that manipulation, all that emotionality is a consequence of a zero-sum worldview, which is incredibly destructive. Okay, Lucinda, most porn seems a lot worse than just a physical act. Most porn seems to deliberately make sex seem either as foolish and mindless or as depraved and taboo as possible. Yes, I mean, it by making it just a physical act, it makes it look, I mean, they're trying to suggest there's pleasure there, right? So in that sense, it's not completely useless, but it is. I mean, the stories, to the extent that they have them, are mindless and foolish. And if they don't have stories, then the sex is completely contextless. And it's like, why are they doing this? Who are these people? What's the connection? And it does lead to the kind of, I think, very, very negative views of sex that we have in our culture. And people's desires around sex revolve around what they saw in porn. Their standards for what is, I guess, desirable sexually revolves around what they see in porn. In every dimension, I think it's corrupting of the soul. Again, I think it has a certain usefulness in the sense that in a culture where we don't know much about sex, it can teach us something about what's physically possible. But mostly it's... it belittles it, it demeans it, it makes it foolish and mindless and depraved. I basically agree with you, listener. All right, let's see. I don't know why people. I'm just gonna side comment because something Shawsbutt wrote in the comments in the section. If there's one movie I don't understand why people like, it's The Big Lebowski. I can't stand that movie. It's a movie about people who don't value anything. It's a movie about losers that goes nowhere. And it's kind of making fun of them, but not really. Anyway, I really don't like that movie. Never got it. Michael, could you reach out to interview Batya Ungar Sargon, a former Marxist who's actually quite good thinker? I mean, maybe. As you know, I mostly interview objectivists, but I'll definitely look into her and see. Equal to reality. I thought I would come in, support, and we'll watch later after I finish my essay on ultra-processed food, defending their legality. Cool. Good luck with the essay. Let me thank just some stickers. Eyal, thank you. And more stickers. Stephen, thank you. And Troy again, thank you. And Eyal again. All right. Thanks, guys. Oh, Mary Elaine had a sticker in there as well. Cool. Thanks, guys. Okay, Supercast. What are your thoughts on the concept of honor? Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of honor is very much related to integrity. I haven't really thought about it that much. I wonder if I think Tara might talk about it in her book on virtues. I think it's a virtue when taken in the right respect. It's about taking yourself seriously. It's about having integrity. Having pride. It kind of captures both from pride and integrity certain important aspects. I think that's what it means to have honor. It's to live honorably, is really to live morally, which is to live with pride, to seek pride. Subkaski, YBS meetup in Dallas, maybe before Austin conference. I'm not going to Austin, so I'm not going to be at the Austin conference. I'm not going to be in Dallas anytime soon, but when I'm in Dallas and have time, happy to do a YBS meetup. We should start doing meetups when I travel around the Yaron Brook Show. Maybe we'll do one in London when I'm in London in March. So maybe there'll be a YBS meetup in London. That could be a good idea. That would be fun. All right. Thank you to all the super chatters. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you guys for being here again. Hope you had a great Valentine's Day, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you again on Monday. Monday, there's no interview in the evening because it's my wedding anniversary, so we're going out to dinner. But there will be a show during the day, so there will be a show on Monday. I will see you then. And what else? Click the love button, as Wanda Freeman said, or the like button. You can just like it. You don't have to love it, but loving is even better. And don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, to subscribe. Don't forget to share. And don't forget to become a monthly contributor on Patreon, patreon.com. And again, I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Bye, everybody.